Every age produces a story that captures its secret longing. It is not always the tale of a hero slaying dragons. Sometimes it is the story of a man who climbs from forgotten valleys to the shining halls of power. America loves such figures, for they carry the dream of self-creation. Today, I wish to speak about this myth, the outsider who becomes the voice of the people, and what it reveals about the collective psyche of our time. I will speak symbolically, using the public image of J.D. Vance only as an example of this wider pattern. He stands in the cultural imagination as the son of the soil who ascends to the citadel, the man torn between two Americas, one wounded and invisible, the other glittering and dominant. Stay with me. What we uncover here will not be about politics, but about the archetypes that move beneath the surface of history. 1. The myth of the hill and the tower. Every civilization builds two realms, the hill where the people live close to earth, and the tower where power dwells. The story of the outsider's rise is the bridge between them. In America, this bridge has become sacred. It is the promise that anyone may ascend. The public story of Vance embodies this myth. The Appalachian Hills become the underworld, Washington the summit of Olympus. His ascent mirrors the collective fantasy of redemption through ambition. But psychologically, the hill and the tower are inner landscapes, the instinctual self and the rational self. To climb from one to the other is the journey of individuation, to integrate instinct and intellect. Ask yourself, which hill within me have I tried to escape, and what tower am I still climbing? 2. The archetype of the orphan. At the heart of every outsider myth stands the orphan archetype, the one who feels abandoned by family, culture, or fate. The orphan's pain becomes his initiation. He must build identity from fragments. In the public imagination, Vance's early life evokes this motif. He becomes the boy who survives chaos and finds meaning through intellect and discipline. The culture sees in him its own secret wound, the loss of community, the disintegration of belonging. The orphan lives in all of us. Modern life, detached from tradition, leaves each person to parent themselves. Ask yourself, where in my life have I felt orphaned, cut off from roots, left to invent myself? The orphan's gift is resilience, but his danger is hardness. He may mistake self-sufficiency for wholeness. 3. The warrior and the climb. The ascent from poverty or obscurity to power carries the energy of the warrior archetype. The warrior fights chaos, both external and internal, seeking victory over circumstance. In American mythology, this warrior is not born of nobility. He forges himself in struggle. He proves that effort can redeem origin. But the warrior, if untempered by reflection, forgets why he fights. He becomes addicted to battle itself. Ask yourself, what am I still fighting that no longer needs to be conquered? A society that glorifies endless struggle creates leaders who know how to win, but not how to heal. 4. The voice of the forgotten tribe. When a man rises from humble origins, he often becomes a spokesman for the unseen. He carries the voice of those who feel unheard. This is the archetype of the messenger, Hermes, the bridge between worlds. Vance's story touches this energy. He translates between two Americas, the educated elite and the working class left behind. The culture invests in him the hope that someone might finally speak the language of both. Yet this gift hides danger. The messenger can be torn apart by the tension of opposites, belonging fully to neither side. Ask yourself, where in my life do I stand between worlds? Do I translate, or do I mediate my own inner division? To be a messenger is sacred work, but it requires humility. One must not mistake the message for the self. 5. The redemption myth. The collective imagination loves stories of redemption. The sinner who reforms, the prodigal who returns. Such myths promise that suffering can be transformed into wisdom. Vance's public narrative embodies this longing. The boy from dysfunction who finds order, the son who returns bearing insight. He becomes an emblem, of the redeemed son archetype. In Jungian terms, this represents the integration of shadow. The child of chaos grows into the bearer of consciousness, but the redeemed son faces a lifelong temptation to forget the shadow that made him whole. He may idealize the self that escaped, rejecting the self that suffered. Ask yourself, do I honor the parts of me that struggled, or do I hide them behind success? 6. The collective shadow of class. The fascination with this myth reveals America's collective shadow around class. Beneath the nation's optimism lies shame of failure, of poverty, of dependence. When someone rises from these depths, the collective both celebrates and resents him. He becomes the scapegoat for the guilt of privilege and the envy of those left behind. The working class shadow haunts the national psyche. It is the part that feels unseen by progress. By projecting both admiration and anger onto such a figure, society attempts to reconcile its divided self. Ask yourself, which part of society do I secretly disdain, and what does that reveal about my own shadow? 7. The trickster of authenticity. Every mythic hero carries a hint of the trickster, the ability to upset conventions and reveal hidden truths. When a person speaks plainly, without deference to authority, the crowd senses freedom. In the cultural image of Vance, this trickster quality surfaces as bluntness, refusal of elite language, a desire to provoke honesty. The trickster's role is not politeness, but revelation. Yet the trickster walks a fine line between truth-teller and manipulator. If he forgets humor and humility, he becomes the very authority he once mocked. Ask yourself, when I speak my truth, do I liberate or merely shock? The trickster's gift is vitality. His danger is cynicism. 8. The marriage of roots and ambition. The outsider who rises must unite two opposing forces, roots and ambition. Roots give identity. Ambition seeks transcendence. Without roots, ambition becomes greed. Without ambition, roots become stagnation. In this myth, the hero carries his homeland like an amulet, both a blessing and a burden. He is forever translating the language of the hills to the language of the towers. This duality reflects a collective struggle. How can a culture honor tradition while embracing progress? The tension between rural and urban, faith and intellect, instinct and reason, these are not political divides but psychological ones. Ask yourself, which part of me longs for the simplicity of the past and which rushes toward the promise of the future? 9. The mirror of the nation. Public figures become mirrors for national identity. In Vance's myth, many Americans see themselves, the striving self, the wounded self, the self caught between belonging and betrayal. When the nation gazes at him, it asks unconsciously, can I still believe in upward redemption? Can virtue rise from chaos? These questions are ancient. They echo the biblical Joseph, the Greek Odysseus, the alchemical process where base matter turns to gold. The modern world simply retells them in new clothes. Ask yourself, what personal myth do I project onto my leaders? The hero, the savior, the betrayer. To see them as symbols frees us from idolatry. 10. The shadow of success. The moment the orphan becomes king, a new shadow appears, the fear of losing authenticity. The public expects him to remain both humble and powerful, both one of them and above them. No human can sustain this contradiction without strain. Psychologically, this is the conflict between ego and self. The ego wishes to preserve the triumph. The self demands continued transformation. The same occurs within each of us when success arrives. The danger of inflation, of forgetting the depths from which we rose. Ask yourself, where has success hardened me? Where must I return to the soil to stay human? 11. The cultural complex of the forgotten heartland. The fascination with Vance's story also reveals a cultural complex, an emotional knot in the American psyche around geography and worth. The coastal centers imagine themselves as the mind of the nation. The interior sees itself as its heart. When the heart feels ignored by the mind, resentment grows. When the mind feels judged by the heart, arrogance arises. Vance's public image becomes the bridge, or the battleground, between these two principles. It shows how much the culture longs for reconciliation between intellect and instinct, elite and folk, Apollo and Dionysus. Ask yourself, which side of this divide lives stronger in me, the thinker or the doer, the critic or the believer? Healing begins when both recognize their need for the other. 12. The return of myth in a rational age. That millions discuss and debate such figures shows that myth is not dead. In an age that prides itself on reason, the collective still seeks symbolic drama. Politics becomes theater for archetypes, hero and villain, savior and betrayer, king and prophet. The story of the outsider who ascends revives hope. That meaning still moves beneath statistics. But myth demands consciousness. If we mistake symbol for fact, we become possessed by it. The task is to see through the story without destroying its beauty. Ask yourself, do I consume myths unconsciously, or do I let them educate my soul? 13. The integration of opposites. At the psychological core, the myth of J.D. Vance, or of any such outsider, is the struggle to integrate opposites. Poverty and power, intellect and emotion, belonging and alienation. Individuation requires this union. Without it, we remain split, projecting one side onto heroes and villains. When we honor those who rise from difficulty, we honor our own potential for transformation. But we must also remember that no ascent absolves us from humility. Ask yourself, what opposites within me still war for dominance? Wholeness comes when neither wins, and both are transformed. 14. The archetype of the prophet. The public often turns outsiders into prophets, voices that announce change. Sometimes they comfort, sometimes they warn. They speak for the unconscious, currents the culture ignores. In Vance's symbolism, this prophetic element appears as a call to remember forgotten people and values. Whether one agrees or not, the archetype serves its purpose, to remind the collective of what it has repressed. Ask yourself, what forgotten voices in me cry for recognition? When you listen, you no longer need an outer prophet, the inner one awakens. 15. Closing reflections, the myth we live. So what does this modern myth tell us? That the American psyche still believes in transformation, still hungers for reconciliation between its many selves. Through the figure of the outsider turned insider, it dreams of healing its fracture between power and vulnerability. J.D. Vance's public story, stripped of politics, is the age-old drama of the human soul climbing from instinct to consciousness, from chaos to form, and then looking back, wondering whether the climb was worth the cost. Stay with me for one last thought. Every time you meet such a figure in history or in life, ask not who is he, but what part of my own story does he carry? For myth is never about others. It is the mirror the collective holds to itself. When you can look at that mirror without envy or contempt, but with curiosity, you begin the true work of psychology, the making of meaning from reflection. Thank you for walking with me through this symbolic landscape. May you recognize the orphan, the warrior, the messenger, and the redeemed son within your own heart. And in doing so, see that the myths of nations are only the dreams of individuals writ large.